Howdy. I wanted to make a tutorial for Tongueless because it's, as far as I know, not one that exists in a lot of detail. And sometimes learn to fly just isn't enough, and sometimes people need a visual guide or some just extra information about how something works. So I wanted to do this. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is actually incredibly basic, but I never see anyone mention it, so I'm gonna go over it very quickly. And that is when you're mounting, like switching to tongueless fly against the ceiling, which is the most common way I see people do it, both creators and players. And something that can be a little annoying about that is two things. One, whenever you mount Yoshi, you will always face the direction that he is facing. So you can see here I face left, he faces me right. And the other thing is that Yoshi will always face in the direction that he's moving when you ditch him, regardless of which way you're facing. So you can see here, moving right, facing left, he is now facing left. So I could do this, and despite never facing to the right, or never pressing right, we are both now facing right, even though we were both facing left. And this comes into play when you're getting Yoshi flight on a ceiling, because as you can see there, if I'm facing forward with forward momentum, it's fine. I can just face forward right away. But it can be a little weird if you're facing backwards, because then you unexpectedly face forwards, which might mess you up sometimes. But now for actual tongueless, there is one very key thing to tongueless Yoshi fly, and that is treat facing backwards as your default state. What do I mean by that? Look at me here. I am facing backwards all the time. See here, I'm facing backwards. I'm falling facing backwards, and you only ever deviate from facing backwards when it is time to do a tongueless pump. So you see falling, facing backwards, and then I pump. So you always want to be facing backwards, only deviate from that to pump. And now when you actually do the pump inputs, one tip that I find helps a lot of people is you want to be, especially when you're first learning, you want to be a bit more forceful with your left input than your right input. So basically, how does tongueless fly work in the first place, actually? Well, normally, when you are flying, you press backwards to pump. But you can only do this if your speed is positive, if you're moving in the same direction you're facing. If I am facing the opposite direction, pressing right does that instead. It makes me start to dive in the opposite direction. And the interesting thing about Yoshi is that you can turn with left and right as well as turning with, or as well as using left and right to control your pumps. So this can mess you up, because if you just try to pump like normal while on Yoshi, he will instead face left and you'll start to dive in that direction. You won't be able to pump, because you have to hold left normally for 11 frames to do a pump, or backwards for 11 frames, and Yoshi will already be turned around by that point. So tongue Yoshi fly circumvents this, because Yoshi can't turn around while his tongue is fully extended. So you could see while his tongue is out, I have at least 11 frames where I can hold left and Yoshi won't turn, so I can do pumps. And the entire point of tongueless is it's another way to prevent Yoshi from turning around for at least 11 frames. And it's a bit of a weird way, because what I'm actually doing is I am using the turn animation itself to prevent me from turning around. What does that mean? It means that Yoshi can't turn while he's already in the middle of turning until that turn is finished. So you can see if I'm just static, like not turning, I instantly turn to the left. Very quickly. I turn around. But you can see that if I turn twice and I do my second turn while Yoshi is almost facing to the right, but not fully facing to the right, it takes a second before he actually can turn around again. And that time lasts more than 11 frames. So you can do your pump input in that window, and that's why tongueless Yoshi Fly with this method actually works at all. because I'm basically using one turn facing forward to prevent Yoshi from being able to turn long enough for me to hold backwards again. And conveniently, at the end of that backwards input, Yoshi is now, once again, facing backwards, ready to begin... Oop, it's over here. Ready to begin another pump. And that's why you want to treat facing backwards as your default state during Tongueless. Now, the other thing that people often struggle with is the actual timing for when to do the Tongueless inputs. Some people use the visual indicator of waiting for Mario's cape to go up. You can see once I start sinking, my cape starts kind of flapping in the wind a bit, and that's the indication that you can do another Tongueless pump. But I think it is much easier to go by feel once you get the hang of it. The important thing is you want to be falling before you start doing the inputs. A lot of people, what they do when they're still learning, is they make the mistake of thinking that they need to do the inputs very quickly, and instead you get something like this, where instead you just end up flailing weirdly, because you can't get a pump while you are still rising from another pump. It's the same thing with normal fly. It would just look like this if I tried. That's what you're doing. You need to wait until you're already sinking before you can pump again, and that's just kind of all there is to it. Otherwise, you just do this a bunch, and you just kind of flail around. Like this. Oops. I can't do it wrong on purpose. So that's another thing you need to work on, is the timing. And that can be a little tricky when you're first learning. But a helpful way to think about it, I think, is that Tongueless Yoshi Fly is very lazy. And what I mean by that is you don't have to do your inputs right away. You can see Mario, he's just kind of relaxing, he's on vacation, there's no rush. My inputs are spaced out, and I am maintaining my height mostly. If you want to gain height, you do have to rush it a bit more. It's a little tricky to gain height with Tongueless, and that's why it's usually not recommended. Usually you would want to switch to Tongue if you're focusing on gaining height. Like so. Although, if you're aggressive enough with your inputs, you absolutely can gain height with Tongueless like this. There's a couple of different timings that work. Some are more aggressive than others, but generally it's not recommended unless you have to. And the other thing I was getting at before is you want to be forceful with your forward input. This helps a lot because you can't just press... You see, this will happen if you only press, or if you very briefly tap forward before tapping backwards for the Tongueless input. That happens. And you want to avoid this because you can still turn left very quickly, and you won't be able to get your pump input out if you only do a very brief forward tap. That's kind of why the inputs are so lazy, because you want to be holding in one direction for just a little bit of time. So it takes enough time for you to face back to the left and get that pump input out. So that's another very good thing to learn while starting out, is be a bit more aggressive with your forward input. This seems to help a lot of people in my experience. Now, why would you want to use Tongueless over Tonguefly? Well, as you could notice here, if you get good enough at Tongueless, you have very, very good control over your movement and your position while flying. You can just kind of like stall forever in this one tiny spot if you wanted to. It's very good for having control, but it's not as good for having a fixed speed or vertical ascents. As you saw before, that's what Tongue is good for. So they kind of cover each other's weaknesses, these two methods. But that's another thing that I should get into with Tongueless, is speed control, because you can adjust how long you hold forward or backwards to speed up or slow down. Oops. to speed up or slow down during tongueless flight. So if I were to, for example, hold back, or hold forward for longer, and back for shorter period of time, I can speed up, or I can do the opposite, where I hold back for longer to slow down, or even go in the other direction. So if you get good at this, just adjusting how long you hold the inputs, you can very easily control your speed with Tongueless, which is not something you can do with Tongue. With Tongue, it gets very messy. You can either do B taps to slow down, but it's hard to get more than 2 or 3 B taps in before you face the other direction. Or you can do this kind of awkward thing where you just kind of switch direction between pumps, but that doesn't give the best control, and it's not really recommended when you could do Tongueless instead. So let's say you need to very quickly adjust your speed while tongue flying. Let's say you're moving very fast, and you can stop almost on a dime with Tongueless and do whatever you want to your speed before switching back to tongue. One very important skill to learn if you want to get good at Yoshi Fly is knowing how to switch on the fly between tongue and tongueless pumps. And when it's appropriate to do so. So let's say I'm going very fast here, I slow down, and now I'm moving slowly with the tongue. You use the tongueless for your speed control, and it's very effective for that. You can even very easily get out of 0 speed, as you can see here, with Tongueless. Now, a lot of the times, if you're pressed up against a wall, and you lose all your momentum while on Yoshi Fly, you may be tempted... Oops. You may be tempted to recover by holding forward, as I'll show here. Oop, I did not do a good job of showing that there. Let me just start over here. You might be tempted to... Oh, this is so awkward to do. Do that, as you can see. I had an air catch stored. Where you turn backwards, then forwards, then backwards. Just to do one pump, and you'll see I lose a lot of height when I do that. So much height that I'm even getting a dive stored somehow. Or if you're trying to do it with tongue, you're still gonna lose a decent amount of height, and it's awkward. You might get an intermediate dive state somehow, which makes it harder to pump, like right there. But instead, if you try to do a tongueless pump, you want to start moving away from the direction that you are facing. And look at that, you lose from 0 speed, you literally do not lose height. You can even gain height from 0 speed to get in the rhythm of pumping again. As you can see right there, you lose no height whatsoever. It's clean, it feels good to do. It's very effortless and smooth. And in fact, turning around in Tongueless is very effortless and smooth, because what I want you to notice for turning around is the specific inputs that are going on here. So if I go frame by frame, and I try to do a tongueless input... Ooh, this is weird, this might not work. Right, so now I'm holding forward extra long, not to slow down, but to switch my direction or my speed entirely, so I'm moving backwards. I can then instantly turn around again at the peak, and now I am moving one direction while facing backwards. This primes me instantly to do another tongueless pump right away. Like that. So switching the directions actually flows really well. You just do one extra input to face back in what used to be forward, but is now once again backwards. And now you're backwards again, primed immediately to do another pump. This is why turning around works so well on Tongueless, with Tongueless. Because of how easy it is to get yourself into the state to pump again right away. And if you, let's say, don't do that extra input to turn back around, you actually set yourself up to transition very cleanly into tongue going the other direction. So you can see, I don't turn around again, and right away I can start tongue in the other direction because I'm facing forward. And it's very easy to also switch from tongue into tongueless, because all I need to do is hold backwards for a little extra time, and Yoshi will already be facing backwards for me, primed to do a tongueless pump right away. So you can even use a tongueless pump to turn around very efficiently and cleanly during tongue fly. So I'm flying to the left with tongue, and then... And just like that, I'm now flying in the opposite direction with tongue. So tongueless, and then back to tongue. It all lines up very cleanly. And because of that, that's why it's so easy to recover from low speeds, switch your speeds, recover from 0 speed, and if all else fails, just wiggle the D-pad. It'll probably work. Press enough buttons and you'll probably get something to happen. Like that. So, that's why you would really like to use Tongueless for fine control over your speed and movement, and then when you get a speed or direction that you want to lock in, and then climb for a bit, that is when you switch to tongue. And this takes a lot of practice to get down, so don't feel discouraged if you can't get it right away. I've been doing this for years, but it works very nicely. You can do a lot of cool things with it. And one of the other things that I wanted to show as an example requires me to first briefly cover parity manipulation. And it's a bit beyond what I'm hoping to go for here, but for the sake of completeness, I do want to briefly cover it. And the idea, if I can quickly get 0 speed by rubbing against this wall, is you can control whether your speed while flying is even or odd. You can see this is 1 speed, so that means my speed is currently odd, and it will stay odd until I deliberately switch it, because Mario speeds up in increments of 4 and slows down with B in increments of 6. So if you have an odd speed, it'll stay odd. If you have an even speed, it'll stay even. Unless there are 2 different ways to switch your parity. You can speed up past max speed, which is somewhere between 48 and 51. And once you're going that fast, you invoke speed oscillation. So every frame that you are holding forward at max speed, your speed will be changing by 1 every single frame. But this makes it very hard to know what parity you have. Right now, I have no idea what it is. It could be even or odd. Let's find out. Okay, it's odd. That was -1 speed, and if I try for a second, I can get into 1 speed. I need to change my mod 4 parity, don't worry about it. Not important for this. I can just quickly... There we go. There's our 1 speed. And now, the other method that you actually want to use to change your parity is to tap B until you have a speed that is -8 or lower, and then tap B again to invoke speed oscillation in the other direction, which will actually speed you up by 1 every time you tap B, until you get down to -7, at which point it will subtract 6 again. So every time you tap B, you kind of cycle -7 to -13, and then up by 1 every time you tap B until you're back up to -7, and it repeats. So if I have 1 speed now, then a B tap puts me at -5, -11, -10, and that gives me even speed. Oops. Try that again. So let's say I start with 0 speed here, -6, -12, -11. I now have odd speed. And the way you want to go about this is if your speed is between, well, technically -1 and 4, but the way it's easiest to do it is if your speed is between 0 and 4, so you are either 0 speed or slightly moving forward. You can just use 3 B taps and it will switch your parity every time. But the reason I bring it up is because we want to know how to do this on Yoshi really quickly. And you can... Oh, he's right here. You can do this with Tongueless Yoshi Fly, too, but not with B taps. It would be very difficult to do this with B taps, because think about it. You need a speed of -8 or lower, but which direction is negative depends on your facing direction, which is constantly changing while you are on a Yoshi. So here I have even speed because I just hit that wall, That zeroed out my speed, so now I know it's even again. And you can see I was getting 0 speed a bunch there. So right now, my speed is positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. But I am moving with a magnitude that is greater than 8 here. So while I'm briefly facing backwards during a tongueless pump, I briefly have a speed lower than negative 8. And the game sees that when I then do backwards plus B input, and instead of slowing me down by 6, it will increase my speed by 1. So if you actually very quickly, because think about it, when I'm facing backwards like this, and my speed is lower than negative 8, technically, because I'm moving backwards, that's, and then I hold back and press B, so I have, that is basically holding back plus B is what, causes you to slow down, and because I'm briefly facing backwards, I have lower than negative 8 speed, so the game will instead increase my speed by 1. But you need to do the back plus B input, and the back input actually comes from your tongueless input, because you're already pressing back right here. I'm pressing back, 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 and my direction will change very quickly once I press back. So now I'm facing forward, back, but it's not instant. It does not change the instant that I press backwards. There's a very small window where I press backwards, and Yoshi is still turning and still considered to be facing forwards with speed that is negative 8 or lower. So if I press B in that very small window right here, I should now change, that should change my speed parity, and that can change it from even to odd. And notably, oops, whenever you mount Yoshi, you will always have 0 speed, because regardless of what speed you had before, I can't really demonstrate that very well here, but getting on Yoshi always zeroes your speed, so you'll always start off even when you land on him. Like that, actually, that's a good way to show it off. So now I know I have even speed, but all I have to do is get at least 8 speed, and then right at the very start, I might have gone fast enough there to invoke speed oscillation, so I'm gonna reset it real quick. There we go. So with at least 8 speed, I want to very quickly, during my back input, right at the start of my back input, tap B. And now I should have odd speed. See if I can't get 1 speed to prove it. There it is. There's my 1 speed. So I went from odd to even, or from even to odd. And I want to show off just how strong, quickly, Tongue and Tongueless are when working in tandem. So I'm going to quickly load up one of my favorite levels. Mod Cape by TJB. This is a very good, very hard training level if you want to learn how to control your speed oscillation, or speed parity. Because that's what the entire level is about. But what I specifically want to focus on here is this Yoshi part. And you can see I have even speed because I mounted Yoshi. And you even saw it briefly there. I got 0 speed. And this climb, right up here to my right, is actually so steep that it completely requires 1 speed. So I need to switch my parity while on Yoshi here. So let's just do the steps we talked about before, and I should now have odd speed. So let's see if I can't get down to 1 speed. Oops. So I'm going to use Tongueless to kind of fly around, and there is my 1 speed. Perfect. There's another thing you need to keep in mind called Mod 4 parity if you're specifically trying to target 1 speed, but that is a bit beyond the scope of what I want to do here. So now, the other thing I want to show off is at the top of this climb. Oops, and that's why I safe stated. And also, Tongueless parity manipulation is very difficult to get down, so don't feel bad if it takes time to get good at it. That is a much more advanced thing. Oops. Even with 1 speed, this is still a very hard climb. Oh my goodness. I got this first try in practice, would you believe it? There we go. This should be good. Provided I don't make silly mistakes. Like that. And what I want to show off here is I am barely not going to have enough height for distance to clear this last pillar. So what do? Tongueless pumps to adjust my speed and position. And then I can switch back to tongue no problem, just like that. And that's really where the strength of using tongue and tongueless in tandem comes in. Because you can very, very finely control your speed and position to adjust yourself. Maybe I could have cleared the top there. Using tongueless and then seamlessly switch back to tongue. And that's why it's so good. And if I wanted to actually show off a little bit, let me see if I have a specific ROM ready to go. I was not preparing for this ahead of time. But why not? It'll be silly if I just give it one old shot and then end the video there. Where is... here it is. One of my other favorite hacks. And one of my other favorite levels to go alongside it. L.E.A. Umar DLC by Poyo. And this level is a very good test of my abilities. It's pretty fucked up. So let's see how far I can get in one attempt and then end the video there. So I should have even speed right now, but that shouldn't matter too much for this level. Especially since I'm going to be constantly brushing against these barriers while I escort the man. Oops. Well, I didn't grab that shell. Okay. One try from here for real, whether or not I grab that shell. I can still keep going for a bit, though. Ooh, got it. And using these pillars here is actually very helpful. Oh, well, I did not hit that man at all. That's fine. We're just gonna pretend he only takes 2 hits to die. Here we get, some Sumo Brother Lightning to teleport the Big Boo to us. Very nice. Just getting some very nice control of Yoshi here with Tongueless, and then I do this careful controlled approach with Tongue until I get the shell, and oh well, that's gonna be, I think, the end, because I could do this forever. I love this level. But I think that's more than enough for this video. So thank you for watching, and I hope this helped.